Hi there, it's Riikka Kovasin here with a new video. This time I'm making an art journal spread. The idea behind this project came from another project actually, where I used tissue paper and I used gesso and some of it and ungessoed or left some parts without. And of course those parts without the gesso absorb the color more than the gessoed parts. So that led me to an idea to use that to make a background. So for this project I started with the Fabriano cardstock I usually use for my creative backgrounds or projects and added a layer of white gesso on top. I used this kind of a coarse brush to get some texture also there and also that broad brush so I'm able to cover the area very quickly. I then used a wet brush to tear these rectangles out of white tissue paper and now I'm using the same gesso to adhere them to my background. I'm only adding the gesso underneath the piece, kind of just adhering it in place and not on top because I then want that kind of a resist or maybe absorbing technique to reveal when I add colorants on top. Before adding the color, I'm then using a stencil and some modeling paste to make a raised pattern on top. At this stage it's still looking white on white, but the next step I'm then adding the colors and then the patterns, both raised and kind of the tissue paper rectangles are revealed. For the colorant I'm using distress inks and inspired by the Halloween makes I made, I continue to use the kind of purple and orange palette. So I just press the ink pads to my craft table and use a wet brush to spread them to my project. And as you can see, both the writing or the textured pattern starts to emerge, but moreover those tissue paper pieces in the background. And I really like the effect. I layer the colors, so first I add this kind of a watercolor layer in a way, just the first initial color layer, and then add some more here and there. Especially the orange got a little bit muddled, mixed in there, so I'm adding a little bit more in this stage. And kind of as always, I then add some splashes to tie everything together. For those splashes, I'm using a fan brush because it's an easy way to get those teeny tiny splashes all over. When I'm then happy with the background, I let it dry and cut it to the size fitting inside my journal. I then used some tape to secure the pages together so I'm able to work them simultaneously side by side. Next I'm then adding some stamping. I'm using a black ink to add some contrast to the piece and used 2 different stamps to stamp a pattern there. There's first this kind of a script stamp just to add visual texture here and there, and then also these branches or berries. They are not defined but kind of echo the same then shapes I have going to the front of the design because I then make a branch on top of the focal point as well. Next I'm turning my attention to the focal points. There's this bird coming to the left side page and then this lady to the right hand side. The bird is something I draw for this bigger painting project I had for my co-worker, kind of just doing sketches for those birds before painting them, kind of trying the colors and such. So I saved some of those sketches and wanted to use something or create something with those. So I used one of those swallows here. As the bird is so much bigger than the little journal I'm working on, I'm needing to kind of clip the tip of her wings off, but I'm using those as the wings for the vintage die cut and just securing them behind her with some tape. For the bird, I just used craft glue to secure it to the page, and for the person I'm using foam tape to get a little bit of dimension. Next I'm then turning my attention to that branch of berries, the same stamp I used in the background, and just use those ink colors to color the branch. So it's kind of matchy-matchy because there's the purples and the orange in use. So everything will match. I use foam tape to adhere the berries in place. There's also this little strip of kind of leftover background there to hide that strict cut or transition between the die cut and the background. I then add some sewing thread there and use just a stapler to secure it in place. As a finishing touch, I add some gesso splashes here and there to add some little more light to the project, and I don't want those splashes on top of the faces of the lady or the bird, so I cover those with little pieces of scrap paper. I then use a sticker book to add some text to the spread, but also add these teeny tiny details when I stopped filming. So there's these little pieces of old negative and also those kind of self-made cellophane tapes. I will share a link to the video where I make those tapes if you want to see. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked the video and I'll be seeing you within a week. Thanks again. Bye bye.